I'd like to discuss with you what we have come to call the full of sewage syndrome. This is actually what we believe is the cause of what is so commonly thought of as irritable bowel syndrome, but it has much more extensive implications than just an irritable bowel. So what is this all about? In Oriental medicine, several different emotions are associated with loss of function in a specific acupuncture circuit. So in the case of the lung large intestine circuit, when you lose power in that circuit, you lose power to the large intestine as well as the lung. Now, the large intestine, when sewage is delivered to it, requires this kind of a pumping kind of a motion to move the sewage down and out. Well, if you lose power in the large intestine, then the sewage gets there, it just becomes stagnant there, and eventually the sewage becomes what amounts to a rock. And it tends to have that happen where the large intestine makes its curves. So, example, it comes up the right side, makes a turn, goes across your abdomen, makes a turn and goes back down and out. So it's at those turns where you tend to get these rocks form of sewage. And once that happens, it begins to, first of all, block the ability for you to have sewage, your feces going out. And so people get either constipation or they get diarrhea, but it's an urgent diarrhea. And if the rock is big enough to occlude the whole circuit, then of course you're constipated. If on the other hand it blocks part of it and there's just a little pathway, then when you do get enough power to go, it goes through rapidly, and when you eat, oftentimes in about 45 minutes you have to urgently find a bathroom. Now the other problem is that this is sitting there putting out toxins 24/7. So you're being poisoned 24/7 with all these various toxins. And those toxins tend to back up and overwhelm the liver, overwhelm the kidneys, and oftentimes you end up with skin rashes as the body's trying to get some of these toxins out. But other common symptoms other than overwhelming fatigue, it can affect your vision, it can give you brain fog, it can make you just tired all the time. So it's a devastating illness. The basic cause then is basically from Oriental medicine. We learn that the main thing that shuts down that circuit is grief. So oftentimes we see people who have grief in their lives end up with what will be diagnosed as an irritable bowel, but there's really not a sufficient therapy for it in traditional thinking because physicians don't think about there being these kind of obstructions in the bowel, and you don't normally see them and pick them up. The radiologists don't pick these up as what they are on x-rays. So first of all, it's fairly easy. You get colonics, and it's important to have a skilled, certified colonic person to do that. And there are certain contraindications that you must apply, but nevertheless, most people can safely do the colonics and wash out these obstructions. And it's also important to then deal with the grief. Now, in our clinic, we have been able to figure out that the difference between memories and emotions is how they're stored in the certain parts of the brain. Memories are stored with a polarity that is correct, but emotions are stored with reverse polarity. So when we use our scalar technology to correct the polarity of emotions, they simply become memories, and now the system turns back on. So you will be amazed at the percentage of people who are going around with grief who end up with irritable bowel syndrome, who eventually will end up with this full of sewage syndrome. So I urge you to consider, if you're having what has been diagnosed as irritable bowel, that you realize that it's most likely this full of sewage syndrome and caused by grief. And we have thus figured out the technologies of how to fairly easily correct this and get your life back.